Hi, I'm Ashley, and today I'm going to continue my birth month watercolor animal series. So I wanted to come up with an idea that was birth month related, but not birthstones, and I found birth month animals. So today we're doing May, which is the snake, and I do 3 different styles of snakes for this card, and I did one that was like traditional, one a little bit more whimsical with some flowers, and then one like a cartoony baby version. And that is so that we can appeal to different types of people, different styles. And these are available on my website for purchase if you don't feel like having to go at them yourselves. And that is shop.craftywithashley.com. But if you are interested in doing them yourself, I have each version in this video as a tutorial. I did speed up the video because it would just be way too long of a video to do them all real time. So each one took about an hour to complete. Obviously, this video is not 3 hours long, so they are sped up. But I didn't cut out any of the actual footage of the painting. So it has all of the steps in there. It's just sped up. And I also kept in my real-time voiceover, basically. So I was talking through what I was doing as I was doing it, and I kept all of that content in and just sped up the video around it. So I really hope that this is helpful for you. I hope you have a go at least one of the styles yourself. The snake turned out much cuter and more beautiful than I even expected it to, so I was really happy with it. And let's go ahead and get into the tutorials. All right, so the first one we're going to do is our traditional one for the snake, and I'm going to start by just getting in a diagonal line. This is going to be like a branch the snake is going to be on, and then I'm just going to do basically some bumps that I will then refine more.
Sweet. What? Good. Anyway. Good.
So I'm just going to start with the middle one here and kind of get in the general shape that I want. This is going to be the neck coming into the head. So get that when you can.
Yes. Gage.
Okay, so I'm just kind of blocking in the idea of eyes here, just to make sure that I like the shape of that and kind of the proportions.
Ben.
This part a little bit skinnier. What?
It's like,
So there's kind of the first section of the snake. And then my next section is going to come up here.
Yeah.
Kind of under the chin. So this is going to be kind of a shaded part here. Generally, though, that's the shape. Okay. And then for our next one, look at that. Up here,
There ain't.
round it off. Yeah, kind of sharply there. Okay, and then he's coiled kind of around, so this one is going to come down and come out the backside of this branch. And it's going to go in this way. And then we'll go back to this side. And he's kind of a little bit more lazily looped over here. So we're going to kind of come out this way. And up. Let's come out just a little bit farther. And this is going to create yet another like loop down below here. So you just make that swoop around. And then one more little donut-y loop in the back. Let's make its head a little bit bigger. Just a little bit more like imposing, I guess. And then this branch is just going to be a little bit jaggedy. I'm going to just lighten up the drawing. Okay, I'm going to do a wash of yellowy green. So this is lemon yellow with just a little bit of sap green in it. And I'm going to do a wash of that over my snake. Okay, now I'm going to take some green and drop it in to the darkest areas. And this doesn't have a lot of water in it. So even though I'm dropping it onto wet paper, it's staying close to where I put it. It's not going to take over. And this will just start to establish some of the shadows. And that'll just make it easier going forward to the next layer. Okay, there is the start of my snake. Now I'm going to mix up a color for the branch. So I'm just going to use some burnt umber with a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm going to place that in the branch. And I'm going to put in some indigo for some shadows. So just kind of dropping in that color. Okay. Same thing on the other side. So start with my umber and burnt sienna. Wash that in. Add in some of the darker color. Okay. Clean the brush off. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. So that was a size 14. I'm going to switch to a size 8 round and work on my snake some more. So I'm going to take some of that sap green and a little bit more of the yellow. So I'm just going to do some dry brushing here on the top surfaces of the snake. So the parts that aren't so shadowed. And I'm just doing that with this bright, bright lime green color. And that's just the lemon yellow deep mixed with some sap green. And I'm just getting texture so that it looks like the snake is scaly. Okay, now I'm going to take a bit more green, add it in, and then use that for the slightly darker parts. And I'll cool it down in just a minute with adding just a little bit of blue as well. Should define that transition point a little bit. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this like bright bluish green. So this is aqua green. Mix that in just a tad. Add that. Now I want to get a tiny bit more muted of a color. So I'm just going to take the smallest amount of red and add that to my greens here. And it's just going to make it slightly more muted so it's not as vibrant or vivid of a green. Just getting a little bit of separation between some of these sections here. Okay, I'm going to take this bright aqua again, and I'm just going to place some of that into some spots on my snake where they have some of these like bright bluish green scales. So I'm just dabbing that in to certain areas. Let's see what cerulean does when I do that. Same thing. Now all of this part in the back is going to be in shadow. So again, I'm going to take just a little bit of my red, mix it in with my green to make it a more muted, like brownish green instead of the bright vivid greens. And also it's not going to be as textured back here. So let's start throwing in some of those darks. Anyway, now right here, there's some significant contrast between the shadow here, the shadowed part, and the really bright part. Like, so I'm going to get that in. And then I'll kind of feather that shadow out a little bit this way until it kind of fades out into this green. Here. Just kind of blend out this side just a little bit and lift just slightly. There we go. And then a nice dark shadow around the face here. Basically just draw around this edge. And then same here on this edge. Make a cooler shadow color so it's still like a green brown color, but it's got this aqua green, so it's a little bit more blue. And add just some hints of that in to cool it down a little bit. Touch of color here and a little bit of texture. Take that same color, but very, very little. Dry brush it on. And I'm going to use that color just to define the edge of the head on this side, because there's not really a shadow on that side, but I need some separation, so I'm just using a slightly different color. Give this a little bit more texture. I'm going to take some really bright lemon yellow here. Water. Brush it on here. Just want to pull down the shadow slightly. Okay. Now I need to work on the face, so we're gonna give some color to the eyes, and they're gonna be yellow ochre here. So I'm just gonna get nice thick yellow ochre, very opaque, and put the eyes in. And then just gonna put some dots of that color around too. Again, it's very opaque, so it will show up kind of over and through the yellow. I mean the green. And this will just add another little extra layer of texture in with the scales. So we have the blue and the green, and now some yellow ochre as well. Some more to the head. Now I'm just going to glaze some green over some of these spots. So the glaze is just a very thin, very watery version of color. And you go over it without very many brush strokes so that you don't disturb the layers underneath.
But
You tidy up here around the face, just adding a little bit more darker shadow. And then I'm just going to add a little dot, basically for the nostril. And then I need to add little lines for the eyes. So I think that's right. I think snake eyes are horizontal, like slits. But I could be wrong. Hopefully not, though, because that's what I did. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of lifting here in some of these areas. So like here, I want there to be a little bit more smoothness and a little bit more of highlight. So I'm just going to lift up some of that color. There, perfect. And then same here. So I'm just adding clean-ish, not really clean, water to that area and then wiping it away and then dabbing my brush on my towel. That looks pretty good. I will come back with fresh eyes in a little bit. I gotta go pick up my kids from school. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit more of my dark green and add a little more shadows. And this is all dry, so this is just glazing on top. Okay, I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more darkness to the face as well, just to get some shadows in. Then I'm just gonna add a little bit more of a, this is just Payne's Gray, to get some darks in for the nostrils and the eye slits. Pretty happy with that. So now I'm gonna take some of my greens, very loose, and just splatter some of that in. Take some clean water, wash it out, not everywhere, but add in some splotchy water, tap in some more, and this will bleed out some yellows Then I'm just going to add a little bit of clean water around the top of the snake and tap in some yellow just to give it a nice glow. I'm going to try to take some very opaque yellow, so just paint, not really any water, and tap in some areas of that color just to bring a little bit of highlight to some of the scales and add a little bit more texture. Just brush a little bit of that on too. Okay, and then a little bit of a bright blue, so I'm going to use cerulean and kind of tap that in over where I had done the blue before just to make it brighter. So this is a nice opaque paint. Well, cerulean is a semi-opaque, but I'm using it really thick with basically no water. I just sprayed the pan to activate it. I'm going to take a little bit of that color and splatter that as well, just to pull some of those blues in. And now just going to let it dry and sign it. For my next snake, I'm going to have it wrapped around a tree branch again, but just a slightly different pose. So we're going to start by sketching in that tree branch, and this one's going to be bent here. And then I'm going to get in that shape again. So just kind of sketch in those lumps where it's wrapping around the tree and get that kind of in first relation to each other. And this one's going to kind of be hanging down. And that head shape here, and I'll refine that more later too, so I'm not worried about it being perfect right now, but just getting in the general shape there, making sure that it makes sense with the rest of the body, and then getting in those coils. And that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do some florals along the bottom. So let me sketch some of those in. So the birth month flower for May is Lily of the Valley. So I'm going to sketch those in. And they're these like little bell-shaped flowers. So just going to kind of generically sketch in some of those, kind of get an idea. And they don't have to be super crazy detailed right now. Just gonna get some in. And I want it to look like the snake is kind of coming down and smelling those flowers or kind of testing them out. I'm getting a feel for those florals. And then they have these like tall, broad leaves. So we'll get some nice big leaf shapes in as well. Coming up behind the snake. And then I'll just maybe do some of the small indications of ones over here. Might even have like a branch coming up above this branch just to tie in the upper part of this painting a little bit. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for the sketch. And then I'm just going to lighten that up by rolling my kneaded eraser over it. I'm going to start with my snake, so I'm just going to do a light wash of a very bright green over my whole snake. So this is just hooker's green mixed with some lemon yellow deep and then lots of water. Just going around the eye there because the eye will be a nice like golden yellow, so I don't want it to have the green in it. And then in some areas I'm just going to take a little bit of yellow ochre and drop that in, so I'm kind of where he's curving we can kind of see the underside, and it is a much kind of earthier tone, and I don't want that to take over, so I just cleaned off my brush and I'm blending it out in those areas. That will make it a more subtle transition, and it'll keep it from just taking over completely. And then here along the edge of the face, kind of the mouth area, is that same color. Okay, and then just a touch along this little coil, a little bit along here. And this is drier, so it's not going to spread as much, but then it's also not going to blend as smoothly. So I'm just taking very minimally damp brush and blending that out. Okay, I am really happy with those blends actually, so I'm gonna leave that there for right now. I'm gonna paint in my branch next, so I'm just gonna take some burnt umber and some burnt sienna. The burnt sienna is a much more orangey brown. Burnt umber is a slightly like darker, more like reddish brown. And then I'll take some sepia, which is an even darker brown, and I can add a little bit of indigo as well to make it really, really dark. Start with my lightest color, which is the burnt sienna, and then start dabbing in my darker colors and letting them blend on the page. If it has uneven water, that's okay with me, because I don't mind having some cauliflowers in the branch. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So now I'm just going to let all of this dry, and then I'll come back, do florals, and obviously details on the snake. Okay, so now I'm going to add some darker washes to the snake and some details. So here I'm just adding some lines where there would be some shadows with some of the like ridges and where the muscles are in the snake. Just getting some of those shadows in and delineated. Okay. And now to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to take my green again, going to brighten it up with the yellow. And then this is a pretty watery mix right here, so I'm just going to tap my brush so that I don't have a bunch of water on, and then hold it pretty horizontal to the paper and just drag that across the page a little bit in the brighter parts, just to get some slight texture. Yep. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of some blue green. So this is aqua green mixed in with my yellows and greens that are in that well. And I'm just adding that in to some of the darker areas. So it's a little bit cooler because of that blue in it. And it'll give it a bit of a shadowed side feel. Okay, now I'm going to take some yellow ochre, a much more concentrated version here, and put in the eye. And I'm just going to add a nice dark around it in some spots to give it a little bit of a shadow. So I'm not outlining the whole eye, I'm just putting it and dotting it in a few spots. And then I'm going to add some of that in to where the mouth opens and for nostrils here. I'm just going to put a little bit of warmth over on the other side of the face. Now to add a little bit more texture, take some sap green and dry brush that over for even more texture. Okay, now to add the dark line for the pupil. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I think that snakes have like a horizontal pupil, so that's what I did. And then I'm just going to take some of that same dark color, a little bit warmer maybe, a little bit more brown into it, and make a shadow here behind the head where there would be a nice dark cast shadow. Okay, and then I'm just going to take that same shadowy color, so indigo, with whatever browns are here on the palette, and put that in where it's going to be darkest. I think that's pretty good. Now I'm going to add the tongue, so it's going to be a little pink color, and just kind of fork it at the end. Now I need to do the florals, so I'm going to dry this before I start on the background. So I'm going to start with a nice mix of all these greens. It'll also kind of clean up my palette for me. Just get all these together. And then I just want to add a little bit more yellow to it for some kind of like freshness, and then a little bit of the hooker's green, same reason, just to get that kind of freshness back in, because again, this is a mix of a lot of stuff, including reds, and so it's kind of muted, but adding in the yellow and the hooker's green kind of gets back some of the vibrancy here. I need to plan this out because the flowers themselves are going to be a lighter color. I'm going to do like light pink, and so those need to be lighter, and I can't paint that color over the green, so I just need to be cautious when I'm doing my shapes here. And I kind of want to get a lot of green in here to really ground it. Okay? So anywhere where I'm not going to do flowers, I'm just going to basically add in some green. Okay, bring some of that up above as well, but I want it to be a pretty pale mix up here. So I'm just kind of splattering it in and then spreading it out with some water. Just get some texture up there. And I'm just going to get a little bit of of water around my snake here and add some yellow, just a very pale wash of yellow, dabbing that in just to get some warmth around the snake. And I can do that really pale over these flowers up top because it's so light that it's not going to really affect anything. Add just a little bit of that below as well. Now I'm just going to drop in some pale pinks, kind of peachy pink color. So I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of yellow into my pink, really watery, and I'm just going to drop some in where my flowers generally are going to be. And then I can add in details later, just kind of make it look like faded out. There might be some that I leave kind of blurred out, like they're just in the background, not the focal point at all. Okay, so this is going in wet on wet, getting blurred out with these greens as well. Just to splatter some of that paint in. And this is a really large brush, so I'm going to get some very large splatters and some smaller ones. Get it a little bit wetter for up here. So back to the snake, I want to add just a little bit of some yellow scales. So I'm just going to take some really thick yellow paint and do some dots in some areas to look like the scales there. And then I'm going to take some cerulean blue, which is a really bright greenish blue, and it's semi-opaque, so in mass tone it's going to go over these greens just fine. And I'm just going to touch some of that in to create some blue scales, keeping it more toward the center of the back, whereas the yellow was more around the edges. See? Now to do the flowers here. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of thicker ink. So more paintless water, permanent rose, lemon yellow, deep. I still want it to be a soft pink, so I'm still gonna have quite a bit of water, just not quite as much as when I did it wet on wet. And because it's going on wet on dry now, it's gonna look a lot more defined. And I'm just gonna pick and choose some areas to make those bell-shaped flowers a little bit more defined. So like this, I don't know, sprig of flowers is gonna be a more defined one. Right, kind of where the focal point is, where the snake is smelling the flowers. Okay, so now I'm gonna take an even slightly thicker mix and do a tiny bit more detail on some of these. So I'm just kind of add a little bit of lines, and even just adding those couple of lines to it really helps to define it a lot more. It doesn't have to be a lot to show up and really kind of add that detail to the piece. For these ones that I made the most defined with the flowers, I'm gonna add some little whatever you want to call these, little where they are connected to this main stem, so they kind of swoop off. This kind of looks sketchy in here already, so I'm just gonna add super pale the indications of those lines, and then I'm gonna take some more green and put in some more leaves. I'm just dabbing up some of that because it was a little bit just more than I wanted it to be. I'm just gonna add, there we go. It's just a little bit too much of like a mass tone, I guess. Sketching in some details here. Okay, I think I just need to add some darker details to the snake now, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'm gonna add some darkness to some areas here and just pull it out even a little bit more. Bit more texture to the branch here. So just some dry brushing. And then just to get the snake to pop a little bit more, I'm gonna do a wash of my aqua green mixed with some hooker's green, which I might regret. We'll see. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit more color for the tongue here. Just a tiny bit of red to it, just to make it stand out a little bit more. Okay. Okay. Now I'm gonna dry it, and I think that's done. For the third one, we're going to do a like cartoony baby snake, and I'm gonna start by drawing kind of an oval circle shape because this snake is going to be in an egg. And then I'm gonna get an opening here, and this opening is gonna be a little bit jagged where the egg has cracked. I'm gonna get in the snake. We're gonna start with the general shape of the head, and then it's gonna be like curled up in the egg. So a little loop here, and then a second loop here. Okay. And then we clean up some of these extra lines. So I'm just darkening the one line that I want to keep. so that as I erase the others, that one will stay. Okay, and then now I'm going to do the same thing with the snake and add some darker lines to just kind of firm up where I want those lines to stay. And then now I'm going to kind of get the head shape more defined here. So then I'm going to do the same thing and erase those extra lines. While I'm doing that, it's also lightening up the more firm lines a little bit. And now to get the eyes in, so they kind of sit on the side of the head, and then I'm just going to really exaggerate the size of them. You have to have a little hooded part here. Okay, and then he's going to have his little tongue sticking out. I'm going to do like a little forked tongue like I did in the other one. Okay, that needs to be quite a bit lighter. So I just dabbing over that to pick up a bunch of it, and then I'm going to roll over the whole thing to lighten up all of it. And that should be good for the drawing. Now we're going to get into painting it. So I'm going to start with the snake and then move into the shell. So start with just a green wash that's a really bright, vivid green, but with lots of water so that it's nice and light, and so I can paint over it. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of a shadowy color, so just some red and green mixed to get a more muted green, but still very watery, and tap that in to start to get just a little bit of shadow in some places. And then I'm going to tap a little bit of yellow ochre in as well to some areas that I want to be a little bit less green. So now that I have kind of the base of the snake in, I'm just going to let that dry. And then I am going to go ahead and work on the shell. The shell is going to be an earthy yellow color, but super, super pale. So I'm just getting a yellow ochre and then using lots of water. And I'm going to brush that on the whole shell, including the inside, which the inside will be more shaded. So I'll add darker colors for the shadow there. Okay, and then I'm going to take just a little bit of a dark mixture here. So this is indigo and sepia with whatever browns are in this. Well, add water, not too much water on the brush though, so tap it off after. And then I'm going to get that in to the shadowed side here. And it's wet on wet, so it'll bleed out. And I'm just going to kind of outline the egg with this color to give it that sense of roundness, but also to kind of cover the pencil line with. I think just kind of blend that out just a touch. Now for the inside of the shell, it's going to be quite a bit darker, but I also want it to be like a warm dark. So I'm going to add just a touch of the same red that I use to warm up my greens. Okay, so that's a nice rich brown color. And then I'm going to water that down. I want it to be pretty dark, but not so dark that it just takes over everything. Because I still want the shell to have a little bit of like a translucent quality to it, which is nice for the medium of watercolor because the transparency of watercolor gives it that effect. So that's nice. So now I'm just going to carefully work around the snake. And then I'm just going to tap a little bit of darkness. I want to make it a little bit cooler for the deepest shadows. Okay. Now for the exterior, I'm going to go back to my yellow ochre and just do a little bit of dry brushing just to get some texture on the outside of the egg. And so for the dry brushing, I'm just using very minimal paint and water and holding my brush very horizontal, so flat to the page, and going over in a variety of directions to get some random texture. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more darkness around here just to set it off a tad, get that depth. And then I'm just going to add some faint hints of some like scaly lines, still yellow ochre, just to give it some additional detail and texture. So I'm not going to do this over the whole thing because that would just be way too much detail for this style of painting that I'm doing, but I'm just going to hint at it. So I'm going to do like 3 or 4 little like scaly shapes here and there, not over the whole thing. And I'm just kind of choosing it randomly, but I'm clustering them, so wherever I put a couple, or wherever I put one, there's actually a couple there. And then I'm trying not to like evenly space them around, because then it doesn't give that same impression. Kind of varying where I'm putting them, so some are kind of in the middle, and then some are along the edges. And I'm just doing like random shapes. They're kind of angular though, so like pentagon, hexagon shapes, not circles. Now I can go back to the snake and add some darkness. So I'm gonna do another layer of color. And here I'm just focusing on adding the darkest colors to the more shadowed part, and then kind of dry brushing that color on to the lighter parts, and that gives it a nice shaded but natural transition. And I'm just gonna tap in some very dark shadow color, let that blend out. Here I'm adding a shadow under the, or like behind where the head is, where it will be shadowed, shaded on the body there. And then the face is gonna do a cast shadow on this part of the body. So add in that darkness there. And for this layer, I'm doing a little bit more texture, so more dry brushing, just because this one's going to be more defined. It's a little bit more, closer to the focal point, which is the head. So now for the head, I'm going to add some nice bright yellow. I'm going to dry brush that on, pick up texture of the paper, and then some green, a little bit of the cobalt green deep, a little bit of shadow on the side of the face. Okay, and then I'm going to add that dark green color here into the bottom part of the mouth. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of my cobalt blue, which is semi-opaque, and using it kind of at mass tone, so not much water, makes it be able to go over the screen. And I'm going to add just a little bit of some scales in, just to kind of pull them in with my other snakes in this series. Okay. And then a little bit of yellow, which is also pretty opaque. So if I get a lot of paint, I can make it show up. This is just adding some little like polka dots of texture. Now I need to do the eyes and the mouth. So let me dry it. And I'm going to take some yellow ochre for the eyes. And I'm going to try to leave a little bit of a highlight. Okay. And then for the mouth, I'm going to do a red tongue. So I'm using that Pyrrole Maroon again. And I'm going to go just out from the mouth. Look at it, a little fork at the end, so like a little Y shape. And then for inside the mouth, I'm going to do my sepia and indigo mix just to get a nice dark. And I'm just going to add that in. Okay. And same color for the darks on the eyes. Okay, I'm going to add the dark in, and just to give it a little bit more definition, I'm going to add like the top eyelid here. Same with this side. Okay, and then I'm going to give it just a couple hints of the little nostrils. Okay, I'm going to deepen up the little like bumps above the eye sockets to make them a little bit, just stand out a little bit more. And the little curve on the head. Kind of blending some of these shadows in together.
Good. Yeah.
Now I want to add just kind of a wash of color around. Okay, add some yellow to get like the glow behind it. Okay, and then we'll add some green in the bottom. I want it to be a bit more of an earthy green, so I was going to add a little bit of olive green to it. Okay, and then I need to create a darker version of that to drop in as a shadow. Go around the egg. Just concentrating the strongest shadow right along this bottom edge, splattering in a bunch of clean water just to give it a bunch more texture. Okay, a little bit more clean water, just because doing the water at different times creates different like layers of levels of texture. And kind of tilt the page, kind of change the bleeding, sop up this extra because I don't want that hard of an edge over there, and just tap in the smallest amount more. Okay, dry it. You would add one more layer of green. Do a little bit of dry brushing up onto the shell. That way it looks like there's some grasses coming up around. Just a larger brush.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.